Hi Nick, it's Tuesday, February 18th. Our recent discussion about The Mandalorian, as well as your video yesterday, has got me thinking about two of our favorite things, sci-fi and philosophy. You talked about the difference between Star Trek and Star Wars, and I love that. However, my thoughts on the topic have been lying in a different place recently. In particular, I wanted to know why I've had different reactions to the reboots for each series. And I don't mean to imply that I just have a preference for one over the other. I mean, I think I love both equally, though I've noticed I've read Discovery and the Abrams reboot more generously than the new Disney Star Wars, and I think I have it pinned down. The way each series tells their story feeds on a different part of my brain. Star Trek uses its universe as a way to tell its story, whereas Star Wars tells a story that just so happens to take place in a sci-fi setting. Let me break this down, starting with the Trek. When I think Star Trek, my thoughts fly off on the philosophy train to thought experiment land. Like you mentioned in your video, you and I have discussed many a time how Star Trek feels like an intro to philosophy class and a shoot 'em up at a kid. Star Trek has never shied away from being an allegory, serving as a base from which Gene Roddenberry and his writers could discuss philosophical and moral topics. By dressing up contemporary topics in a spacesuit, Star Trek could remove the audience's layers of bias, conflict of interest, and assumptions to discuss some pretty big ideas and events. For example, civil rights, the AIDS epidemic, and even on a fundamental level, what it means to be human. The show is one big argument for what the future of humanity should be. The Federation is egalitarian, the Enterprise's mission is peaceful, and the crew's actions generally reflect this. Even when a character may stray from this, like when Picard had a deeply emotional hatred of the Borg after his assimilation, the writers use their behaviors as a case study to reinforce the main thesis of the series. I chuckled when you were talking about characters in moral crisis, because that's what this next point is. In the episode I, Borg, Picard's hatred encourages him to use a Borg drone to, effectively, commit genocide. It's too much story for one video, but as a TLDR, Picard is pulled back from this ledge by the basic principles of the Federation, expressed through the other characters' humanization of this drone. It's simple, powerful. Picard is in crisis, he's presented with options, but comes to the conclusion that Federation principles are best. The series thesis is supported, and the argument for Roddenberry's future strengthened. Good pattern. This, however, is where the rub with the new series lie. They don't have the same internal logical consistency. Discovery makes moral arguments, but not to maintain the same central thesis that previous series had. It feels like they're trying to work backwards from the triumphs of the original show, its powerful social commentary and aggressive envelope pushing, to its creamy moral center. But this just leads to like this weird diet Star Trek? In the Abrams reboot, Kirk and Spock are also effectively space cowboys, shooting their way through the quadrant and riding the Enterprise off into the sunset. You know, or a planet. Kind of crash onto one. Star Wars, on the other hand, is a little bit of a different beast. George Lucas has explicitly stated two truths about how he made Star Wars what it was. The use of monomyth, the religion-style parable, as well as old samurai and pilot movies. The former, for those who don't know, is a type of storytelling that many of humanity's most famous stories have been based on. It would take a while to explain it, so I'm just gonna throw a link in the description read that, then come back and watch the rest of this video. Its vector, at least for Star Wars, is a format of storytelling you are probably familiar with, given that most of the world identifies with some form of religion. To make the Force, as well as other thematic aspects of the Star Wars universe, Lucas shamelessly put together just a cafeteria tray of concepts from a bunch of different religions. Brahman and Samsara from Hinduism, Tao from Taoism, and a Christ-like figure in the form of Anakin Skywalker. He even borrows some storylines. This is actually a cool aside that I found while researching. Sidious clouding the Jedi Council's thoughts has been held up as a dark mirror of God hardening Pharaoh's heart in the Book of Exodus. Not sure as to the validity, but if it is true, George Lucas is out there playing 4D chess with our childhood memories, and that's crazy. Ties like these are pretty subtle, but powerful. The latter truth I mentioned, callbacks to classic tropes, which you also mentioned, calls back to other familiar works and makes Star Wars feel right at home, right out of the get-go. For example, when I see an X-Wing trail a TIE fighter, I have pleasant flashbacks to watching the show Dogfights on the History Channel, before the History Channel's logical executives got abducted by aliens. It is for this reason that I feel more strongly about Star Wars, I think. Not for the religious content, I mean, I'm not very religious in the first place, nor for the nostalgia. More so, I think the way Star Wars is written taps into these fundamental story structures stored in mine and many other people's brains. The George Lucas directed movies all invoke these tropes, which makes the story feel more at home in the viewer's minds. The new movies, however, they don't. They really don't. They walk and quack like Star Wars, but they don't access the same memories or themes. I think this is why I am more critical of them. Call it the uncanny valley, call it the narcissism of small differences, whatever. They don't feel like Star Wars because they aren't told like a Star Wars story. They don't feel authentic. And as we've discussed before, a feeling of authenticity is what endears people to something. I have very distinct memories of Star Wars and the tropes it invokes. Seeing Luke Skywalker toss his lightsaber into the ocean, or completely reverse an arc and attempt to kill his nephew, pulled me right out of this emotional headspace. This headspace of, oh, this is Star Wars and I like Star Wars. That headspace, gone completely. This is a point that has even been hit on by Mark Hamill himself many times. This video is getting a bit long. I don't want to drag it on because I do love both these things and I don't want to crap on them for 8 minutes straight. But as a parting summary though, I think I'm forgiving of Star Trek because it hits on the logical parts of my brain. And the new series either seem off balance on the philosophy to shoot 'em up spectrum, in the case of the new movies, or like a misinterpretation of Gene Roddenberry's original argument for what the future of humanity should be. And it's pretty easily to mentally discard a bad argument, you know what I mean? Star Wars, however, occupies this uncanny valley in my mind. Episodes 7 through 9 feel like a departure from the well-worn storytelling tropes of George Lucas, and for some deep psychological reason that I can't name, that just makes me mad. Glad I got to have this talk with you. The audio synced this time, so we're good. But I hope you enjoyed my pure, unadulterated nerd rage. I do love these things. I'm just passionate about them. I'd love to hear if you have any comments. I'll see you tomorrow.